Hello, my friends. This is Eric Parker with One Number Tableau Experts. In this week's video, we're going to take a few minutes to dive into regular expressions. Specifically, we're going to look at a few different use cases where I have found these handy over the years. If you have used regular expressions in other tools, you will see a lot of similarities to how they work in Tableau. If you have not, then you will get to learn something here. And so just high level, how I would define regular expressions is they are a family of functions in Tableau, which help you to identify patterns in string data and then do something as a result of that pattern. So that pattern could be to match and return a true false. It could be to replace a value. And there are other use cases as well, but specifically we'll be looking at matching and replacing in today's examples. So let me start out with something like this. If we look at some Superstore data, we have this list of products and we say, hey, I just want to return printers, copiers, and scanners. How do I do that? Well, you could manually do that. You could manually filter on the product name, or you could write a calculation that has a bunch of contains functions in there. But it might be more efficient at scale because you're trying to match on several different criteria to use a regular expression. So here's how we'll do that. I'm going to hit the drop down here in the top of my data pane and say create calculated field. I'll call this just printer, copier, scanner, true, false. And we are going to use the regular expression called REGEX match. So let me open this up little window up here. Let me just search on a regular expression here. Okay, so let's double click on regular expression match, which brings it in there. Now, the first thing that it asks is, well, what field are you trying to match on? So I would say, well, I'm trying to match on product name. Okay, and then what are you looking for? So in this case, I am looking for the words printer, copier, or scanner. Now, before we start typing in our matching criteria, I want to call something important out about regular expressions, which is that they're case sensitive, right? So what I mean by that is if I search for printer, but I search for, proper case printer, but it just so happens that in the text, it's all lowercase, well, I'm not going to catch that product because it wasn't proper case. So a lot of times what people will do is they will do an immediate, upper or lower conversion to their field. So for example, I could say, okay, regular expression match, product name. I'm going to throw the lower function around this so that it only returns all the text in lowercase. And then here, what I want to search on, I'll go like this. I'll do a opening single quote, and then I'll say printer, all lowercase. And then if you have multiple things, you pipe delimit them. So I say printer, I do the pipe, which is just shift and then hit the key above your enter key if you don't use that much, copier, and scanner. Close out my single quote, do my closing parenthesis, and according to Tableau, we're good to go. So let's give this thing a spin. I'll say okay. Now I've got my printer, copier, scanner field over here. It is a true false as I hoped it would be. And let me just actually explain that for a moment. So that is what regular expression match returns by default. It will either say true, this product name does return this thing, or false, it does not. So let's drop that field on color just to see it in action. And now I can see that anything that's orange is true. And if we just do kind of a quick glance at some of these product names, right, I've got things like copier, printer. So seems like overall this is doing what it's supposed to do. So cool. We have successfully tackled the first of our three examples. Now let's jump over to regular expression replace. Now this is something I came across when working with one of my clients who is a school district. Side note, a lot of the video ideas here are inspired by our work with clients and things that come up during our projects or like classes we're teaching and questions that students have. So we'll put all sorts of details down below for those sorts of things in case you want to connect with us on a bigger level outside of these videos. So in this scenario, what I was trying to do was I wanted to shorten my school district names. So this is a list of all the school districts in Washington State. So you can see most of them follow this naming convention of the name of the school district followed by the words school district, right? Aberdeen School District, Adna School District. But that's not exclusively true, right? If I go down far enough, I find Fife Public Schools. What I was trying to do was to clean up some labels for a chart that I was working on, and I just wanted to get rid of any text I didn't need. So school or district or public, all of that could go away. I just wanted them to be called Everett, Evergreen, Ferndale, etc. So if it had just always ended in school district, you could maybe do something like, well, get rid of this many characters off the end of it using like a left, right, or mid function, but it's not really an option for us here. So we're going to use regular expression replace. All right, I'll call this school district abbreviated. And I forget if I mentioned this already. I might be repeating myself, but I am going to link this workbook in the description below. So if you're like, this seems cool, but I'd like to follow along, then you can do that. Okay. So this time around, we're looking for regular expression replace. Okay. And what are we replacing? School district. Now, I could do the lower or upper here, but actually I have a good rationale for not doing that. So bear with me. What am I trying to replace? So in this time in single quotes, I'm going to put school, okay, or district, or public. And what is it that I want to replace that with? Just back-to-back quotes. So I do want to speak to this for a moment because I put school in here, not schools. So actually what this would potentially cause a problem if I did something like this. If I put school, then schools, Tableau works its way through these replacements in order. So I actually had this happen in an example recently where I was trying to do this, and then like Fife Public Schools, it just said Fife space S because it replaced the school with a blank, and then it just left the S at the end. So you would either want to do this in reverse order, so put schools and then school, or we've only just scratched the surface of regular expressions. There are different types of characters that you can use in wildcard expressions that, in regular expressions that mean different things, such as a wildcard character. So one of the cool things that I could do here is to replace the S at the end of school with a period, which just means whether it's school or whether it's school with something else at the end, in our case, schools, replace that with a space. Okay, now let me go ahead and add the trim function around this entire thing, because if I replace whatever I'm doing here with a space at the end, I'm just going to have like two random spaces. It'll be like Fife space. So let's throw trim around the end. Trim just removes any leading or trailing spaces in a text string, not the spaces in the middle of a text string, but just at the beginning or end. All right, so let's look at our school district abbreviated. And look how good that's looking. I think we are in pretty good shape here. All right, how cool is that? All right, last example will be another use case for regular expression match, but it's going to be a little bit more advanced this time around. So this came directly from something I worked on in an office hour many years ago now. I've actually been intending to do this video for a long time, and it's just finally coming to fruition. So I was working with a client, and what they had was a data source that had kind of been merged from numerous data sources. So they might have something like a customer ID or a reference ID, but there are different formats depending on what different source system that it came out of. And so what they wanted to do was to be able to quickly identify a specific pattern. So for our case, I've simplified it and I've just said, hey, if the pattern is letter dash number, flag that as true, like that came from the system of interest, otherwise false. Because you can see there are other types of formats here, right? There's like number, dash 5 more numbers, or there's 3 letters, dash 2 letters, dash 3 numbers. So just these formats should come back as true. Now, when I first did this with the client, we did do this the hard way, like just trial and error until we got it to work. And then I was trying to do that in advance of this video and just struggling. And then I just thought, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT. And of course, ChatGPT came through and gave me the perfect calculation. So let me go ahead and, I'm just going to pull this up and show you what's going on behind the scenes here, because this is kind of even more advanced than our last example. In this case, this tells us, okay, we're going to match on the lowercase, the reference ID. And then what are we looking for? So this is saying it should start with lowercase letters, and there should be 3 of those, and then a dash, and then there should be 3, I think it means there's 3 numbers, and then that's the end of the text string. So I'll just tell you this right now, like this, I'm not a regular expression genius or so. I don't have all of these different rules memorized, but I kind of know enough to get around. ChatGPT will be helpful. I would also like to call out just sort of a great community resource, which is the Flairledge twins. So if you don't follow them already, just on like LinkedIn and elsewhere, you should. They've got a great blog post on Tableau regular expressions, which I refer back to fairly often. And one of the great things that they have here is sort of telling you, hey, here are some of the basic rules. This is not everything, but here's some of the stuff you need to know. So you might notice some of these, like, okay, a up-facing caret is the beginning of a line, a dollar sign is the end of the line. /D means match any number value. So just using this legend here and then looking at that calculation, I feel like you might be able to make sense of, okay, that's what's going on. So you can always try this from scratch, but then you can also just ask ChatGPT for help and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Can you please write the calculation that would do what I'm looking for? So there you have it. That is a rundown on 3 different use cases for regular expressions. If you need help with your regular expressions or truly anything else with Tableau, we do it all in office hours. We'd love to meet you and work with you. It could be data modeling, could be level of detail expressions, dashboard design, dynamic zone visibility, whatever. We'd love to help. So let us know in the description if this was helpful, or sorry, in the comments rather, if this is helpful, or if you're still feeling stuck. We're always happy to help you there if we can. So thank you so much, and we will catch you next week for another Tableau video.